Okay, I want you to picture a scenario. It's, let's say, a Tuesday night. It's finals week.
Oh, I can feel the panic already.
Right. The air is just thick with anxiety and the smell of, I don't know, instant ramen. And you're looking at your roommate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say this roommate is an absolute academic weapon. We're talking 4.0 GPA. They actually get quantum mechanics. They think organic chemistry is fun.
We all knew that person, or we desperately wanted to be that person.
Exactly. On paper, a genius, but, and this is a huge but, you are currently watching the same person trying to operate a microwave.
Oh, no.
They're just staring at the buttons like it's the cockpit of a spaceship. They put aluminum foil in it last week. They genuinely cannot function.
That's the classic archetype, right?
Yeah.
Absent-minded professor. High horsepower, absolutely no steering.
None. And then you have the flip side. That other friend, maybe they barely scraped by in their classes, their GPA is a state secret.
A mystery.
A total mystery. But you drop them into a party where they know absolutely no one, and I don't know, 20 minutes later, they're running the music, they've charmed everyone, and they've somehow fixed the broken coffee table with a paperclip.
MacGyver versus the valedictorian.
So the question we're really wrestling with today is simple, but the answer is, well, it's incredibly messy. Which one of them is actually smarter?
It forces us to ask what we even mean when we say the word intelligence. Is it just passing a test? Or is it, navigating the chaos of the real world?
Today we are diving deep into the psychology of intelligence. We're going to figure out if your roommate is a secret genius or if our whole definition of smart is just broken. We've got a lot to cover. The history of the IQ test, brain biology, and the really spicy debates around genetics and gender.
And a good place to start is probably with a comparison that kicks off this whole debate in Psychology 101. Think about Albert Einstein.
Okay, yeah. The heavy hitter, wild hair, theory of relativity. If you look up smart in the dictionary, you see his picture.
Undisputed. Now, think about Lionel Messi.
The soccer player.
Is he intelligent? On the field, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's genius. The way he sees the game, anticipates movement, the way his body just knows where to be. But if you put a physics test in front of him,
Who knows?
I have no idea how he'd do.
And that is the core tension. If intelligence is just, solving academic problems, then Messi might not make the cut. But if it's the ability to adapt, to master a complex skill that society values, then he's arguably right up there with Einstein. So let's unpack that, because for a long time, psychologists didn't really care about the messy kind of intelligence. They thought it was one single thing, like a fuel tank in your car. Either you have a lot or you don't.
Right. And this takes us back to 1904. A guy named Charles Spearman. He was a stats guy, really into the numbers. And he used a technique called factor analysis.
Factor analysis sounds like a class I would drop immediately. What is that?
It's basically just looking for patterns in data.
Mm-hmm.
So he looked at how school kids performed on a whole bunch of different subjects. And he noticed something. He saw this really strong pattern. If a kid was good at vocabulary, they also tended to be pretty good at logic. If they were good at, say, paragraph comprehension, they were usually good at spatial reasoning too.
So it wasn't random. It wasn't like I'm great at words, but I can't figure out basic shapes. If you were smart in one area, you were probably smart in others.
Precisely. The correlations weren't perfect, but they were there. So Stearman concluded that there must be this underlying general mental ability that powers everything. He called it the G factor.
G for general intelligence.
Yep.
I like the analogy of a computer processor for this. G is like the speed of your CPU chip. If you have a fast processor, you run everything. Faster word processing, video games, spreadsheets. It's just raw horsepower.
That's a great way to put it. And for a long, long time, G was the dominant theory. It suggests intelligence is this single measurable thing. It's why we have IQ scores one number to rule them all.
But I feel like anyone listening to this is already poking holes in that. We all know that one person who's brilliant at code but can't write a coherent email to save their life.
Exactly. And that's where the rebellion comes in. Enter Howard Gardner. This is the theory everyone secretly loves because it validates our own specific quirks.
Gardner just looked at the one and said, Spearman's dog doesn't match reality.
He did. He specifically looked at savants. These are people who might have very limited mental abilities in most areas, maybe low language skills, can't live on their own, but they can hear a piece of music once and play it back perfectly.
Wow.
Or they can draw an entire cityscape from memory down to the last window.
If intelligence was just one processor speed, that shouldn't be possible. If the chip is slow, the whole computer should be slow.
Right. You should be able to run 4K video on a calculator. So Gardner proposed his theory of multiple intelligences. He argued, we don't have one computer, we have a bunch of different specialized computers or modules in our brains. He originally listed 8 of them.
Let's run through a few, because this is where people start diagnosing themselves. You've got your linguistic intelligence, that's your poets, your lawyers.
The people who always win at Scrabble. And then logical mathematical, that's your Einsteins, your scientists.
Right, and those are the 2 that schools care about. That's what the SAT tests.
That's what gets you into a top university, yeah. But then Gardner added things like musical intelligence, spatial intelligence. Think of a painter or an architect.
And here's messy. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence.
There he is. It's not just being athletic. It's a form of problem solving with your body. Then Gardner splits people skills into 2 really interesting types, intrapersonal and interpersonal.
Okay, break that down. People always mix those up.
Interpersonal is between people. That friend who can smooth over any argument, understanding others. Interpersonal is looking inward, understanding yourself, your own motivations, your feelings.
Okay, and what was the last one?
Naturalist intelligence, the ability to see patterns in nature. Think Charles Darwin.
You know, that's the one you want if you're stranded on a desert island. I know which berry won't kill me. That's a very solid intelligence to have.
It really is. But here's the thing. Gardner's theory is popular, but it's hard to test scientifically. So another psychologist, Robert Sternberg, he looked at Gardner's list and thought, okay, 8 is a lot. So he simplified it into 3 parts. And honestly, this is the one that I think applies most to real life.
This is the real-world trio.
First, you have analytical intelligence.
Yeah.
This is academic problem solving. Right. What we test in school, there's one right answer, you have to find it.
That's the roommate who gets straight A's but can't do laundry.
Exactly. Second is creative intelligence. Generating new ideas, adapting when life throws you a curveball.
And the third?
Practical intelligence. This is just street smarts. It's for everyday tasks where there isn't one right answer.
Give me a real-world example of that.
Okay, let's say you miss a huge deadline for a paper. Analytical intelligence is writing the paper well. Practical intelligence is figuring out how to email the professor, what to say, how to frame it so they grant you an extension without hating your guts.
That is a survival skill. I feel like we spend all our time on the analytical in university, but practical is what actually gets you through life.
And the data supports that. Practical intelligence is barely correlated with academic grades. You can be a genius in the classroom and totally lost in the boardroom.
Speaking of boardrooms and navigating people, we have to talk about feelings. For a long time, emotions were seen as the opposite of intelligence. Don't be emotional, be rational, you know?
Right, that was the motto. But that all changed with the concept of emotional intelligence, or EQ. It's the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use emotions.
So it's not just being nice. I think that's a common mistake.
Not at all. It's about data processing. Can you look at a face and recognize the emotion? That's perceiving. Can you predict how that feeling will change? That's understanding. Can you manage your own reaction? And can you use that emotion to fuel creativity?
That makes me think of every terrible group project I've ever been in. There's always one person who is super smart, has all the answers, but is so toxic that the whole thing just falls apart.
That is a low EQ problem. And studies show EQ can be a better predictor of future success than IQ. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if nobody can work with you, you're a liability.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. Not everyone buys into this.
Yeah, that's right. Gardner himself, the multiple intelligences guy, was a critic. He basically asked, are we stretching the word intelligence so far that it becomes meaningless? Is being empathetic an intelligence, or is it just a personality trait like being agreeable?
That's a fair point. If everything is intelligence, then nothing is. But let's go back to the thing that started it all. The test. The IQ test. Where did this thing even come from?
It actually began with surprisingly good intentions. In France, early 1900s, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. The French government wanted a way to objectively identify kids who needed extra help in school.
So it wasn't about finding the gifted kids.
No, it was about finding the kids who were falling behind so they could get support. Binet came up with the idea of mental age. Basically, what should an average 8-year-old be able to do? If you're 8, but you can only answer questions like an average 6-year-old, your mental age is 6.
Okay, simple enough, but then it came to America.
It did. A guy named Louis Terman at Stanford adapted it. He created the Stanford Binet test, and this is where we get that famous IQ formula. Mental age divided by chronological age times 100.
Let's do the math. If I'm 10 and my mental age is 10, 10 divided by 10 is 1, times 100, my IQ is 100, average.
Perfect. Now, an 8-year-old with a mental age of 10 10 divided by 8 is 1.25.
Okay.
Times 100 is 125. A high IQ.
But here's the huge flaw. What about a 60-year-old man?
Okay.
Let's say he takes the test and scores as well as an average 30-year-old, which is pretty good. But use the formula. Mental age 30 divided by chronological age 60.
That's 0.5 times 100. He gets an IQ of 50.
Which would imply a severe intellectual disability. But he's functioning perfectly fine, so the formula just completely falls apart for adults.
Which is why we don't use it anymore. Modern tests, like the Ways, they compare you to other people in your age group.
Yeah.
They rely on the bell curve.
Ah, the bell curve, that hill-shaped graph from stats class.
That's the one. The average is set at 100, and the test is designed so that about 68% of people fall between 85 and 115.
And for a test to be scientifically good, it needs 3 things, right? Standardization, reliability, and a validity.
That's the holy trinity. Standardization means you've tested enough people to know what average is. Reliability means it's consistent. If you get a 120 today and 105 next month, the test is garbage.
And validity.
Does it actually measure what it claims to measure? An IQ test is considered valid if it predicts things like how well you'll do in school.
And the evidence suggests it does.
It does. It's fairly predictive of academic success.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's analytical intelligence. It won't predict if you're a good person or if you can fix a washing machine.
Okay, so let's get under the hood. Is intelligence biological? If I cracked open a genius's skull, would their brain look different?
Everyone wants to know this. Do smart people have bigger heads?
It was a whole thing in the 19th century.
The correlation is tiny. Basically, no. A bigger hat won't help you. But brain size, measured with an MRI, has a moderate correlation. The real secret, though, seems to be efficiency.
Efficiency.
Yeah, brain scans show that when smart people solve problems, their brains are actually less active. They use less glucose, less sugar.
Wait, so a smarter brain is a lazier brain?
A more efficient brain.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like this. If you open a huge program on an old, clunky laptop, the fan starts screaming, it gets hot, it struggles.
That's my laptop right now.
But on a brand new machine, it's silent. It does the work without breaking a sweat. High intelligence seems to be high neural efficiency.
Which connects to the biggest debate of all time, nature versus nurture. Was I born with that high-end laptop, or did I build it?
This is maybe the most passionately debated topic in the field. And we get our best data from twin studies.
I love twin studies, nature's perfect experiment.
It is. Identical twins who share 100% of their DNA. If they're raised together, their IQ scores are almost identical.
Okay, but they grew up in the same house, ate the same food, maybe it's the environment.
That's why you have to look at identical twins raised apart, adopted by different families at birth. Their IQ correlation is still very high, about 70%.
So genetics is a huge player.
It is. The consensus is that heredity accounts for about 50 to 70% of the variation in intelligence scores.
But that leaves a pretty big chunk on the table.
A very big chunk. And that's the environment. We know from tragic cases, like Romanian orphans raised with minimal human contact, that severe neglect can just crush intelligence. The brain doesn't get the input it needs.
But on the flip side, we have something called the Flynn effect.
Yes, this is the fascinating finding that intelligence test performance has been rising all over the world for decades. An average person today would score significantly higher than an average person from 1930.
Are we actually smarter than our grandparents?
It's probably the environment. Better nutrition, more schooling, but mostly, we live in a much more cognitively complex world. Think about a video game today versus 1950. We're constantly flexing that analytical muscle.
Okay, so now we have to wade into the murky waters. We can't talk about IQ without talking about group differences.
Right, and we have to be honest about what the data says,
Right.
but also very careful about what it means. Historically, there are average score differences between racial groups in the U.S. White Americans have tended to average around 100, and Black Americans have averaged lower.
And people see that and jump to some really dangerous and wrong conclusions. They assume it's genetic.
They do. But there's a crucial analogy to explain this. It's called the flower pot analogy.
Okay, break it down.
Imagine you have a handful of genetically identical seeds. You plant half in a pot with rich, fertile soil. You plant the other half in a pot with poor, rocky soil.
The flowers in the good soil are going to be tall and healthy. The ones in the bad soil will be small and weak.
Exactly. The difference between the two pots is 100% environmental. When we look at racial groups, we know that genetically, humans are remarkably similar. Race is a social construct, not a biological reality.
So the score gap is the soil, not the seed.
That is what all the evidence points to. When you control for environmental factors, quality of schools, nutrition, socioeconomic status, the gap shrinks. And then there's the psychological factor of stereotype threat.
This concept is so wild, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. If you belong to a group that has a negative stereotype attached to it, say group X is bad at math, and you sit down for a math test, you feel this extra anxiety, you're afraid of confirming the stereotype.
And that anxiety just eats up your brain power. It's like running another program in the background.
It is.
Yeah.
And it makes you perform worse. It's been shown in African Americans on standardized tests and in women taking high-level math tests. If you tell them beforehand that the test shows no gender difference, they score higher.
Speaking of which, the data does show some average gender differences, right? But it's very specific.
It is very specific. And again, these are just averages with huge overlap. But the data shows girls tend to be better spellers, more verbally fluent, and better at locating objects.
Explains why my wife can always find the car keys.
Could be. And boys tend to outperform in spatial rotation, like mentally rotating an object in 3D space and in complex math problem solving. Not computation, but the abstract problem solving part.
And boys are also more likely to be at the extremes.
Right. At the very high end and the very low end of the spectrum. So you find more male math geniuses, but also more males who need remedial help.
Wow, so we've covered a lot. We have G versus multiple intelligences, the messy history of IQ, nature versus nurture.
And I think the big takeaway, especially if you're a student worrying about your own intelligence, is remember the difference between aptitude and achievement.
A test measures what you've learned, achievement, or predicts how you might learn in a school setting, aptitude.
But it doesn't measure your worth. It doesn't measure your creativity, your resilience, or your character.
It doesn't measure if you can fix a laptop with a paperclip 5 minutes before a presentation.
Exactly. That is practical intelligence, and no Scantron sheet can capture that.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought from Howard Gardner. We mentioned his 8 intelligences, but he actually speculated about a 9th one.
He called it existential intelligence.
The philosopher's intelligence.
The ability to ponder the big questions. Life, death, existence. Why are we here?
We have tests for logic and words. We test how fast you can rotate a shape in your mind. We do not have a standardized test for how well you ponder the meaning of the universe.
And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe some things shouldn't be reduced to a number.
I think my roommate might be an existential genius. He stares at the ceiling a lot. Maybe he's not zoning out. Maybe he's contemplating the void.
Or maybe he's just wondering where he left his socks.
Probably that. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Go thank your roommate for whatever intelligence they bring to the table.
See you next time.